Good evening, Bills Mafia. What's going on? Happy Monday. Welcome to Buffalo Late Night. I am your host, Thomas DeLoss. Welcome. You can find our show on all social media and streaming platforms, including Spotify and YouTube. And if you're watching right now on Twitter, hop on over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, and come join the conversation. Now, tonight, joining us, we have two guys that have been here before, two of my buddies. First off, we've got from Cover one of the originators, the co-host of the Cover One Buffalo podcast alongside Aaron Quinn, my guy, Mr. Greg Tompsett. How we doing, buddy?
Good, Thomas. How are you? It's a good time. I'm glad Cut Down Day is almost here. We're almost ready for the final roster. I'm excited. Obviously, it's been a weird couple days for Bills fans, and it's nice to be talking about football tonight.
Yeah, I'm kind of, not to say I'm glad, but I'm kind of ready to be over the projections. I feel like everybody's got their toes in the water, so it'll be nice to kind of just everybody jump in and we can kind of digest it all and see how it all looks. But yeah, to your point, it has been a whirlwind, last couple of days for the Buffalo Bills and the organization, specifically for a team that, generally speaking, things are, pretty easy going. So we'll see how that goes. Robbie, welcome. Good evening. Glad you're here with us tonight. And also, we will be having Kevin Massare join us momentarily. He's got a pretty hectic life right now. His wife, Amanda, is pregnant, so it's kind of touch and go. But whenever he joins us, he'll be popping in. First things first, we're going to bring in our guy, Dr. Kyle Trimble, Mr. Banged Up Bills himself from Twitter. Kyle's going to hop in and he's going to give us his usual correspondence on all things injuries. Kyle, how we doing, brother?
I'm doing very good. Good to see both of you guys tonight.
Yeah, what's going on, Kyle?
Absolutely. Kyle, so for everybody who doesn't know, Kyle is a correspondent for Banged Up Bills. He is Banged Up Bills, but he's from Cover One for Locked On Bills, as well as Buffalo Rumblings and our show here, Buffalo Late Night. Kyle, obviously this past Friday, the Bills played the Panthers in the preseason finale. Any notable injuries that you want to touch on from that game?
Nothing too crazy. Some minor injuries to depth guys that probably won't make the roster, but I'll highlight some of the bigger ones because most people are going to recognize most of those names. The first one's Eli Anku. He left very early in the game. I think he only had one snap in the game due to a left hamstring injury. He was trying to push forward. He got knocked back suddenly. His left leg was anchored into the ground, got pushed back. That eccentric contraction or the muscle under tension led to the hamstring strain, didn't return to the game. He's on the roster bubble right now, but that injury uncomplicates things. So he'd be a nice depth piece if he can be healthy. We had Duke Johnson, who had an injury scare with his left ankle, though he came back pretty quickly and was still quite effective. Tanner Gentry, he had a right knee / hamstring strain. I'm not sure where the hamstring strain came from based off what I saw off the film, but he did land pretty hard on the right knee when he was catching a 5-yard pass to the left in the midway through the second quarter. Once again, another roster bubble guy. I think he'd be a great practice squad guy, just where he would be at, but I don't believe his injury should impact his ability to get back to the practice squad or have a long-term ramifications. Some other things, Kyrie Elam got his right hand jammed up a little bit, but that didn't look like anything crazy. He was just, I noted on the broadcast, but the team didn't report it. It was just more of one of those little things you see, doesn't really happen, to have a substance to it. But I like to highlight those things because sometimes they can happen to be problems later on. The first thing I think of is Jerry Hughes a few years ago. He had that wrist injury that kind of lingered all the season, and then the Bills got in hot water. So I highlight that stuff because it might come up later. And then the final one was Cam Lewis. He broke his nose. We got official word from that from Matt Perino at NewYorkUpstate.com. His chin strap I heard failed, and the face mask him in the nose. It's just unfortunate, but that has no bearing on anything. So everything from the game was pretty clean. And then from practice, the only big things we saw was Isaiah McKenzie left practice Saturday. Don't know the details on that. And then Quentin Morris, he left practice day with what looked to be a right hamstring strain. John Scott of Spectrum News had got great video of him, not necessarily coming off the initial run, but he caught him running halfway through and he was pulling a blame. Trainer's looking at his right hamstring area. Some people have thought cramps, and that's a possibility, but usually when you see cramps, it's more urgent and you might get down and really stretch it out. So that's where I was thinking it was more hamstring, and you can just feel it tightening up and just kind of not, gnawing at you there. So those are the bigger ones. And then we've had some of the other guys that they've kind of been lingering around: Greg Mance, Tommy Doyle, Tim Settle. One other thing, Eric Turner noted this one. OJ Howard had dealt with a left ankle injury. Don't know when it happened. We know it happened. It was affecting more in the second half of the game, though, because Eric had noted that the ankle was taped up. He was lacking a lot of explosiveness, but that seems to be the theme of OJ Howard this season. He's big, he moves slow, doesn't really do a whole lot. So I'm sure the ankle injury didn't help him, but with the way he's been playing, it hasn't, nothing's really benefited him anyway. So those are the big
to
things.
Call him Cooler Lee Smith.
Yeah, yeah.
He's just a little more fun. He looks better. Like he has a very athletic build. Like he looks like a better athlete, but he's actually not.
Well, Lee Smith is a great interview. So, I mean, when you listen to him, I haven't really heard OJ Howard talk too much. I would consider Lee Smith to be cooler, more from a redneck standpoint, but maybe
I don't know how many F-bombs OJ Howard drops.
I don't know, but
Lee Smith has a very, very liberal usage of
Lee Smith is honest. Don't you talk in vain of Lee Smith, okay? Mr. One catch a season.
One touchdown a season.
Yeah. I saw him sprint down the sideline for one play. It was fantastic. It was majestic.
It's funny. I have a video on my phone, and it's like, I don't know why I caught a Lee Smith touchdown on my phone, but it was the one time, and it was his, I don't know if it was his second trip with Buffalo, but he caught it, and he thought people were going to catch him in the end zone, and he ended up falling straight through down to the actual, the walkway. So it was pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
Any information on Quentin Morris? Any indication as to what might happen in regards to him?
No, not right now. I mean, we tend to see the Bills, when the injury occurs with a calf, a hamstring, things like that, they tend to err on the side of caution right when the injury happens. So we usually see like a week, 2 weeks. I don't know that he'd be an IR candidate. I mean, we don't know the severity of it, so I could be eating my words at that point, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. I don't know what they want to do, because it's really hard to tell how soft tissue injuries, the severity of them, are on film when they're grade 1, grade 2. When they're grade 3, which we don't see often, but those guys usually go down pretty significantly. We saw with the Cowboys tackle, is it Tyron Smith?
Yes.
Yeah. So he went down. He was in obvious pain. They said that was the muscle had ripped off the bone. Like, that was pretty severe. But typically when you see more of a milder strain, you kind of say, okay, it's there. We know it's the strain, but we don't know how severe it is. And we've seen guys miss. I remember Tyrell Dodson missed like 6 weeks, I think 2 years ago, and it didn't look like much of anything on film. Missed 6 weeks. And then Quentin Morris could be out 2 weeks with this thing. We've seen Matt Milano do the same thing. So we see more information on that one. But I know he's been in the mix for a 53-man roster in terms of making the roster, or whether he's going to be a strong practice squad candidate. So,
right. And you would anticipate he'd probably be more in line with what, an IR potential spot?
If it's severe, yeah. But I know that they have to be mindful of how many IR spots they put anybody on IR, once a cut down date, but then they have to be mindful of who they want to bring back and know that they have, I believe it's 8 spots they can use this year. So like, they're not going to just bring everybody back and say, oh, throw in an IR for 3 weeks, or I mean, now it's 4 weeks, but it was 3 weeks in the previous. And then we're going to just bring it back as we need to. So like, there's gonna be guys that put in IR that don't come back because they simply don't need those guys, comparative to, hey, we need to keep some of these guys in mind in case something does happen down the line, God forbid, to one of the bigger players. So right. They definitely have to be judicious about that.
Right. Well, I appreciate it. Any last thoughts going into this week?
Jordan Poyer is looking really good. I like that. And then we will find out what happens with Tre'Davious White and Marquez Stevenson and any other guys that are iffy right now. So we'll find out a little less than 24 hours from now.
Yeah, likely next Monday when we have you on, we should probably have at least an idea as to what's going on with Trey White. So, needless to say, again, Kyle, we definitely appreciate you. Kyle Tremble, you can find him at Banged Up Bills on Twitter, as well as his website Banged Up Bills. Kyle, have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Good night, guys.
See ya. So, let's get moving on to tonight. First things first. Obviously, I want to touch on my buddy Zach Mills. So, Dr. Zach Mills, dentist for kids. If you have a child that ever has issues going to the dentist, he is your guy. Dentist for Kids offers individual dental treatment for kids of all ages by providing a relaxed, fun, and encouraging environment. Dr. Zach's goal is to help your child build confidence in their smile and with their overall dental health. A Dentist for Kids is currently accepting new patients, and they participate with most major insurances. If you visit Dr. Zach, mention Buffalo Late Night for $25 off your choice of a custom whitening kit or an electric toothbrush. I just did the custom whitening kit. It is fantastic. In fact, I think my teeth look way too white on screen right now.
Nice.
I feel like they almost look fake. Call today to set up an appointment with Dr. Zach and his team. Like I've said every single week, if you have a child, I know myself, I wasn't a huge fan of going to dentists as a kid. If your kid has, problems going to the dentist and you're in Rochester, take him to go see Dr. Zach. He is the best. He's the best in the industry at what he does. And he'll make sure that your kid has a very, very comfortable experience. So let's move right into it. Obviously, Matt Ariza was released this week from the Buffalo Bills amid gang rape allegations. I hate saying that because it's just insane. Greg, were you satisfied in terms of how the organization handled the situation?
I don't think satisfied's the word I would use. I think, like most things in life, everything's easy in hindsight. I think I would have liked them to find out more information more quickly and to make the decision they made, because I don't want to make light of the fact they ultimately made the right decision.
Right.
And moved on from this. And from what it appears, that within 48 hours of finding the detail to it, made that decision and moved on. I respect that. I think that was the right thing to do. You heard that echoed by, Dan Dawkins, Mitch Morris, Jordan Poyer, multiple players today. So I respect the fact that they did that. I would have liked them to find that out earlier. I would have liked them to find that out before they released Matt Hawk. I would have liked them to find that out before they had multiple marketing elements. I would have liked them to find that out beforehand. So all of that said, the allegations are horrific, but they are allegations. If they're true, the people involved should be in prison.
Or below it.
So, obviously I don't know who is involved in what, but it appears that this girl had a horrific life-changing incident, and that, whoever was involved in that should be punished, as justly as our society allows. So, beyond that, this is a football show. I host a football show. I plan to talk about football, but I will say, I thought that some people went a little far in the back patting or the celebrating of the team, in that I do appreciate the fact that they made the right decision, but I also think much of that was avoidable, and that if they had spent the time or energy needed to find this out earlier, could have made this decision before this came out, whereas now it seemed like a reaction, but ultimately the right reaction. So I respect the fact that they did that. Right.
And, the one thing I kept going back to with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott is they've been, basically the talk of the town. I mean, they're always ahead of the curve. They're very respected in how they handle business. So it was very odd in terms of their approach. Do I think they were potentially duped by this kid? It's entirely possible. We don't know what was told. I do think for as much time as they spend on scouting quarterbacks and looking at attributes and different skill sets for different players, why they don't spend more time, looking at the background of some of these guys and what potentially they've done in their past. Because it seems like every year, whether it was the Jake Fromm, racist remarks, or not that Josh was anything that bad, but Josh had some tweets when he was younger, or
Sure.
Mitchell Trubisky liking to kiss titties. There's plethora of things out there that we just don't really know about, and I think they need to spend a little bit more time in, like you said, in a situation such as this, which seemingly is becoming more and more common, which is really unfortunate. But my hope is that because we're having the Deshaun Watson situation, the situation with Matt Ariza, that ideally in a perfect world, maybe they can set up a framework to kind of get past this or figure out a way to get these people out of the NFL. Do I believe that's going to be the case? Probably not, because the NFL just never does anything exactly right. I mean, Kareem Hunt's still in the NFL and they have video of him assaulting a woman. So everything is just kind of up in the air. Needless to say, we've got the Ian, if you want to throw that up real quick for me. This is the Crisis Services Center of Buffalo. Bills Mafia Babes brought this to everyone's attention, and I wanted to make sure I brought this up as well. Each day, this is their little slogan. Each day we lead crisis services as Erie County's only 24-hour crisis center and community resource for those in need of safety, help, and hope. If you were raped or sexually assaulted, crisis services can help. Experiencing interpersonal violence can be challenging, isolating, and or confusing time. You're not alone. Crisis services can help with your questions. Their 24-hour hotline is 716-834-3131. Bills Mafia Babes was trying to get donations of $19, and they do take donations on their website. Buffalo Late Night will be donating $25 in lieu of recent events, and feel free to join this great cause. They do great things, and just like all the other donations and all the other charities that Buffalo supports, this is another one that you should absolutely be supporting. And you know, in instances like this one, it definitely helps people who have been affected by atrocities such as this. That being said, and I don't really like to do such a kind of cold diversion, but
there's no good way to transition.
Yeah, no, I don't know how really to transition beyond that. So let's move right into tonight's 53-man projection, look ahead, however you want to say it. We are less than 24 hours away from the big cut down, which, you know, it's funny. It seems like in past years, this was the day that we all kind of chomped at the bit to see what everybody else was releasing. And maybe our GM would pick up our favorite release player from another team, because the Bills never really had a roster kind of filled with anything. You know, we would take anybody's crumbs. But this year, this is the one where we're hoping to God that they keep our favorite players, and, you know, that Joe Shane and Brian Dable don't come a crawling and taking our players. So that being said, let's start right at the top at quarterbacks. I know it's going to be pretty easy. Who do you got?
So obviously we're going to go with starter Matt Barkley. This is, you know, there's, I think 3 or 4 positions that I don't think there's any debate, honestly. You know, this maybe safety, defensive end, maybe defensive tackle. Like some of those are just pretty clean and easy. Right. It's Josh Allen, it's Case Keenum, and Matt Barkley will be tight end or quarterback 3 from the practice squad. Seems to be pretty straightforward.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think Matt Barkley has carved himself out a little niche, just like Tanner Gentry on the practice squad. They just, you know, you become Josh Allen's best friend. That's the thing. Hey, NFL athletes, if not that you're watching this, but, you know, for some reason, if you so happen to stumble on the show, become Josh Allen's best friend. You'll get a roster spot. I promise you. Moving on. You can get it. Yeah, absolutely. Moving on, the running back position. I've got Devin Singletary, Zach Moss. I know there was some rumors going around, which is very strange to me, that Zach Moss was potentially getting put out there for a trade. I never understood it, considering he's got, you know, and some years on his contract.
If you read it, it was logical speculating and dot connecting, but purely dot connecting. It's like, well, they have Devin Singletary and James Cook, and they'll be a valuable 1-2 punch, so it looks like Zach Moss is expendable. That was literally the extent of it. It was a serious radio host that stated it. So then other people like Aaron Wilson and other like connected insiders came out and said there's 0% chance that that's going to happen. He's not going to be moved. So it was actually refuted a couple hours afterwards by Aaron Wilson, who's pretty good.
Yeah, Aaron Wilson is, I mean, he is one of the best in the game in terms of breaking down stuff.
Yeah, he doesn't get the attention that like the Schefter and
I don't even think he's
Rappaport and stuff like that.
Does he even have the blue check mark? Like I don't even think he's like verified, which is ridiculous, because he worked for the Texans, I believe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
it's
he is now. He is now. But you're right. For a long time he wasn't. But he's actually also one of my favorite salary cap follows. People ask me all the time
mm,
for like tips on how to get better at the salary cap. He's excellent. He's very, very good.
yeah. And for anybody that needs salary cap help, Greg Tompsett is your guy. He is fantastic, especially for guys like myself who are number illiterate. It definitely helps. Um, so yeah, Zach Moss. Obviously, I truly believe I wouldn't be surprised. Now, I think Devin Singletary is going to make it tough. I know you don't see running backs typically get a second contract, but Devin Singletary, you never know. Maybe they throw him a 1 or 2 year extension. He has looked very potent so far, and he hasn't had a consistent, offensive line really in any of the 4 years he's been in Buffalo. So it'll be intriguing to see how this goes. But yeah, Zach Moss, James Cook, obviously, Tywan Jones is that just, he's going to be the gunner. I don't see anybody at this point unseating him. The only one that potentially would have been Raheem Blackshear, and I just don't think that was going to happen. And then Reggie Gilliam, obviously.
Yep. Spot on. Exact same. I do have Blackshear kind of earmarked as my 2023 Taiwan Jones. I do think that he's going to be a priority on the practice squad. And I will say, I know fans always get worked up about everyone. There are some players that are worth getting worked up about, but I would remind people he joined the team after Dable and Joe Shane left. He has no connection to them whatsoever.
Right.
And running backs are virtually never claimed on waivers. They're one of the least claimed positions. So there are some higher premium positions that we do have to be a little bit worried about, and guys who had history with Shane and Dable that I think make sense to connect dots. But Raheem Blackshear is not one of those.
Right. And speaking of that, let's just transition right into wide receiver. So obviously I would say the 4 locks of Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, and Khalil Shakir, that's pretty much set in stone at this point. Then it gets a little mucky at that point. What are you thinking, Greg?
So yeah, I think it's fairly clear, and I've waffled on, can they create a 7th wide receiver spot when thus far Isaiah Hodgins, who I think is the player most in question here, has tried to play special teams but has done pretty poorly.
Right.
It's been rough. So I like the fact that they're trying, because that tells you they're trying to fit him onto the roster. So I think it's pretty clear cut with 6 guys: Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Shakir, Jake Kumaro, because of his special teams ability, and Jamison Crowder. I think that those 6 are pretty clean. I right now have Hodgins on, but I've flip-flop a couple times, and I'll talk about it with the position. He's my 53rd guy right now, in that trying to find a spot for him. There's a couple other spots where we'll talk about, do they do, 8 or 9 offensive linemen? Do they do 5 or 6 linebackers? Do they do, we'll talk about what happens at cornerback. So right now I have 7. I think Hodgins would be game day inactive, but I think because of kind of some game theory of figuring out, can they hide him to avoid getting waived, that they try to hide Hodgins, and then we'll see where it goes. But I don't think it's a slam dunk. I think it's possible that he gets released, and I'll be completely honest, if he gets released and claimed by the Giants, it's not the end of the world. I think he's a solid NFL caliber player, but he is our 7th receiver. He is our 6th best wide receiver. I think maybe he's a little bit better receiver than Kumaro, but he's not some hidden superstar that we're missing out on. He's just a nice player we've seen develop that I'd like to keep. But if he's not one of our 53 best, it's okay.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what it comes down to at this point is, I mean, if you look, Gabe Davis is getting another contract. The way that Brandon Beane talks about him, you would be hard pressed to believe that he's going to let him walk. And then beyond that, you've got Isaiah McKenzie and Khalil Shakir. All signs are pointing to that guy's going to be a superstar. I mean, he looks as much a veteran as any wide receiver that's ever stepped into the NFL. So, I mean, those 4 right there. So you're talking he's 5. And how often do the Bills' 5th receiver, does he really ever see much action as it is, let alone a share of the reps? So I think I would be very surprised. I know Joe Miller has been banging the drum on Isaiah Hodgins, and I totally get it.
And they're not wrong. The guys who are fans of his are not wrong. He has potential. He looks interesting. It just,
It's a
he
massive
waited
uphill
until
climb.
year 3 to show it. Like he
Mhm.
needed to show this earlier. We're seeing it
Yeah.
from Khalil Shakir day 1.
Right. And it's tough because he's been hampered by injuries, but I mean, just the same thing with Marquez Stevenson. They don't care.
Yeah.
Sean
Sadly, it's not
McDermott,
how it works.
right. Yeah. Sean McDermott's, one of his best qualities is availability. And, if you can't get on the field, he doesn't care. He'll find somebody else to replace you very quickly. Moving on, I think the one that I think a lot of people have really been up and down about is tight end. And obviously today, with the news of Quentin Morris getting injured, that I feel like OJ Howard is probably sitting back in his locker just with a little grin on his face, knowing that this guy potentially could be out of his way. What did you think in terms of tight end?
So there's been enough smoke around the OJ Howard thing that I won't be naive and say that there's absolutely no chance and that he's an absolute lock. I will say I always thought he was brought in as a blocking tight end. He was brought in as a big-bodied tight end who could let us run 12 personnel, and he would be the one to stay in to block while Dawson Knox went out in a route on play action because we're in 12 personnel and make them think we're running. So I never viewed him like he's always been a good blocker. But then the injuries sapped him of the athleticism we saw at the combine and at Alabama, and he just hasn't been that same guy for a long time. So I never viewed it as like some, amazing, if Dawson Knox goes down, now we have this dynamic weapon behind him. I never viewed it that way. So I think some people were disappointed when they were looking at the route running and the explosiveness and like one-on-one drills, and he kind of looked like what I expected him to look like, which is a big-bodied guy who can like post up in the red zone. And we saw him catch that touchdown where it was actually pretty good coverage, but he just ran a slant route and posted up inside and caught the ball and fell down in the end zone. Like that's what big-bodied tight ends do. I also don't know that if Dawson Knox gets hurt, that he's the guy who would step in. I think it's possible that he would stay as tight end 2, and my tight end 3, Quentin Morris, I think would be the starting tight end.
Right.
Or that we just run a whole bunch of 10 personnel. We'd figure it out later.
Probably.
So I have 3 making it. I have it as Dawson Knox, OJ Howard, Quentin Morris, and I have Tommy Sweeney as our first temptation for Dable and Shane, and that we hope he makes it to practice squad, but I would honestly expect him to get claimed.
Right. Yeah. I think it's Quentin Morris has shown up. I mean, he's been very, very impressive. He very much reminds me of like a Charles Clay prototype.
Yep. Good guy.
That good guy that, more athletic than the average tight end.
Yeah. I think he's a significantly better receiver than Tommy Sweeney. I think
which I believe he's a converted receiver, correct?
Yeah, he was a receiver in college.
Right. So I liked the one thing I will say in regards to OJ Howard, and Aaron Quinn mentioned this. I think we need to get away from the thought that we have to hold guys to what happened in their college years or pre-injury and just look at them in that scope, because it's hard to, OJ Howard may never be back exactly to what he was prior to an Achilles injury. That's not to say that he can't be successful. I think the problem is we have this idea of what we want him to be.
Yeah.
And if he's never that, then they're like, oh, well, he's not going to be this. He's not going to be successful. That's not the case. He's a very good blocker and he could be successful. Problem is he's just not what he was at Alabama. But we also have to remember
use the comp. Robert Gallery was like that. Robert Gallery is remembered as this horrific bust. And I always remind people like, no, Jamarcus Russell was a historic bust. Who's the linebacker for Seattle who's supposed to be the super safe? Aaron Curry those are guys who like washed out of the league and never played. Like Robert Gallery was a starting guard for 10 years. Right. Now he was never this franchise tackle that everybody thought he was going to be. But if you collect a paycheck in the NFL for 10 years, you're not a bust. You're just not.
Right.
So OJ Howard was never going to be, or ended up not being, not that he was never, he ended up not being this transformational once in a lifetime, generational tight end prospect that people thought he could be. He ended up not being that, but he's been a nice NFL player. He's been fine. He's been a nice, tight end too, and that's fine. And that's what he is. We just always go back to, oh, well, he wasn't what we thought he was, so he's terrible. And like, well, there's room in between those two things where he can be not what we thought he was, but still functional in his role.
Right. And I think you also have to give him a little credit. Look what has been around him for most of his career. I mean, Alabama was stacked, and then you go to the Buccaneers, where you're playing alongside Cameron Brate, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Chances are you make a mistake, you're not going to look very good because everybody else looks fantastic. So,
and then you get a chance with a great quarterback, and he brings his best friend tight end with him.
Right, exactly. You're never in a winning situation. So no, yeah, I agree. I think it's tough. I think tomorrow's going to give us a little bit of clarity in terms of Quentin Morris. I think it's entirely possible that we see that secret handshake go to the parking lot with somebody like a Shaq Lawson, that I think is what $125,000 dead
Shaq
cap.
Lawson, Bobby Hart, Jake Kumro, Reed
Right.
Ferguson, Case Keenum. There's 5 or 6 guys. Greg Van Roten, Greg Mance, Bobby Hart. There's a handful of guys like that and Shaq Lawson all could be released with no real damage, and then they could just be re-signed the next day. So there's a couple.
That's my guess with him is just, especially since they reduced the number for IR to 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if they in fact feel. Now that'll be the true testament as to what they feel about Quentin Morris. Is if they go ahead and they do those gymnastics for Quentin Morris, then the perception would then be that Quentin Morris was going to have a more significant role than we anticipate, and potentially is that that 2-3 tight end. So,
yep.
And I agree. I think Sweeney's tough. Is a feel good story. He's Josh's buddy, and he does some nice things. But I mean, 10 years ago, he'd probably be our tight end 1, and we would have been salivating over the idea. But now at this point, there's just it's a numbers game, and unfortunately, if you don't bring something to the table outside of being Josh's best friend, you're kind of really in the wind. So,
well, and I'll say, I know Quentin Morris left practice today. So to that point, maybe there is something where they have a sneaky way to hide him for 4 weeks, and then Sweeney makes it his tight end 3, and they deal with that going into week 5 of like, hey, who's the guy? And does everybody keep their spot? And hey, did somebody else get hurt during that time? So I do expect a little bit of roster shenanigans between now and then.
They just told Quentin Morris to, come up lame, and so they could kind of just stash him.
Like, oh man, that looks pretty bad, doesn't it, Quentin? We better go check that out. You better take a ride back to the locker room. That looks pretty bad.
All that acting skills. He went to the Lionel Messi school of acting. Okay, let's get right into the offensive line. Obviously, I would say not starting 5, but really starting 6. With Dawkins, Saffold, Morse, Pates, Brown, and Quessenberry. I think that's pretty much the starting 6. Beyond that, who do you got?
So I think you're spot on the way you described it. I think it's going to be Brown at right tackle with Quessenberry as the super guard, the new Ryan Bates, and he can back up every single spot where Bates would go to center and Quessenberry would play any of the other 4 that come in. So I think he's kind of that guy. I'm a little torn. I think Tommy Doyle is one of them, although Tommy Doyle is a guy who could be one of those IR spots too, that they could use a parking lot guy and then put him on the IR and re-sign someone. I would like it to be Greg Mance and Greg Van Roten, but Eric Turner has worn me down that Bobby Hart really has looked functional at guard, and that maybe Aaron Cromer is just a wizard, and that he really has looked okay. And that I'm just scarred from what I've seen historically, and I don't ever want to see him play tackle again. But I'll use, we talked about, I'll go to another, famously fantastic offensive line player here, like I did with Robert Gallery. Eric Flowers did that. Eric Flowers was a horrific tackle.
You're going way back in the time machine there.
Eric Flowers was pretty good when they moved him to guard, and that, you have that kind of spot where maybe Bobby Hart's functional at guard, and there's enough beat reporters who are around the team all the time and seeing practice, beating that drum, that maybe he makes it as the 9th guy. So I have it Tommy Doyle, Greg Mance, Greg Van Roten, and David Quessenberry, but I won't be shocked if Bobby Hart is one of those guys on Thursday who's re-added after Tommy Doyle goes on IR.
Right. Yeah, all those media guys probably know, not us fan sites. So, who knows? We'll eventually get there. I had 10 guys in terms of offensive line, those 6, and then Mance, Doyle, Hart, and Van Roten.
Yeah.
I when it comes to the Bills, they love having a lot of extra personnel to be able to use, especially guys that have position flexibility. I don't think they want to run into an issue like they did last year, where Bucker went out and it was just a hot mess. I mean, that Jags game was a mess, and I don't think they want to run into something like that again, where they were just depleted on all sides. So I think that's pretty cut and crystal clear. Now let's jump to the defensive side. I think this is where there's probably a little more questionable battles. The defensive line, I think, is pretty easy in terms of Rousseau, Miller, Basham, Epinesa, and then the 4 new guys, Lawson Settle, Daquan Jones, and Jordan Phillips.
Yep. 5 defensive ends, 4 defensive tackles, 9 defensive linemen. I think you could set your watch to it. I've heard the things about Brandon Bryant, and I respect it because I think the guy works his butt off.
He looked really good.
He's one that is probably one of the players that is weird to say, but I think they almost are okay with the Giants claiming him. Like, I think he's at a point in his career where he kind of is what he is with the Bills. And you want to know what? The guy probably deserves a roster spot.
Right.
And they would probably wish him well to just be able to go and be like, you want to know what, dude? We would love to have you. Obviously, you are absolutely welcome, back here in our locker room anytime. He's about to turn 29.
Right.
He probably deserves it. And that if they're going to claim him and give him because if you make the week 1 roster, you get your salary is guaranteed for the whole season. So, out of all the guys, there's a couple more that'll come up later here. A couple at corner. We already talked about Tommy Sweeney. We already talked about Isaiah Hodgins, where you're talking about guys on the rookie contract, guys going into their 3rd year that we're still kind of figuring out what we have there.
Right.
Bryant's the one guy that I guess maybe Mike Love are the guys that you want to know what? If the Giants claim them, God bless them. I'd be happy for those guys if they got legit 53-man roster spots, because short of injuries, they're a nice insurance policy. And we have guys who are roster caliber that'll be on our practice squad. But we can probably do that with Kingsley Jonathan and Prince Emili or Eli Ankou and not really have much difference. So I'm honestly, out of all the guys, I want to keep Isaiah Hodgins. I want to keep Tommy Sweeney. I want to keep Kingsley Jonathan. I want to keep Eli Ankou. I want to keep Prince Emili. I kind of almost hope Brandon Bryant and Mike Love get claimed by the Giants just so they get a chance to play.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have them on my practice squad. Both of them, Mike Love.
Me too. Me too.
Because of their value. And Mike Love came in. I think he played in 2 games last year and came in and played very, very well.
I think Bryant got spots in 2 or 3 as well.
Right. Brandon Bryant did really well. And same thing with Eli Ankou. I think the 3 of them, when you call them, and I think that's why, being a McDermott love them is you very much know what you're going to get with them. They're very sturdy, very steady. And that's something to be desired. And you're right. Very much so. Those are the guys that you pull for to get that opportunity to get claimed and you get an opportunity to finally play, because the tough part is on a Bills roster, when you got Ed Oliver up the middle and then you got Daquan Jones and Tim Settle
and Jordan,
never going to see a game. Right. And Jordan Phillips, they're never going to see a field ever. Not this season, at least. So
it would take multiple injuries for it to matter.
Right. Moving on. And obviously with the defensive end, that's pretty seamless.
Same. Yeah, I think there was a couple of people maybe floated a question about Shaq Lawson at one point, but his play more than quieted that down. He looked excellent. He's now probably put into question. At one point, I did think he was trending towards defensive end 5 who would be BB game day inactive sometimes, to now I think he's the matchup play, and that when it's the Chiefs and the Rams and the Packers, it's probably Carlos Basham. But when it's the Ravens and the Titans and the Patriots, I'd rather play Shaq Lawson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now it's probably kind of a matchup play.
Right. And that was his calling card. Absolutely. It was, setting the edge, really good against the run. And he even looks a little bit leaner. So I wouldn't be surprised if, maybe you get a little bit of a renaissance out of, Shaq Lawson. Same thing with Jordan Phillips, two guys that coming back to Buffalo finally get another opportunity to kind of hit it. They're not going to get a ton of play. I'd be surprised. It's probably in the 20 to 30% snaps just because there's just so many numbers. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be matchup specific for both of them, but they should have, quality play from them.
Yeah.
Defensive backs, obviously it starts with Tre'Davious White, and a lot of us are waiting with bated breath just because the Bills have been very, very tight-lipped as to what's going on and what's going to happen with him. There are so many people that still think he's going to be ready for week 1. It's
getting harder by the hour.
It's 7 days starting tomorrow until we play the Rams week 1. And at this point, obviously, I think it's probably trending towards they're just going to keep him on the 53 and not the pup, just because it just doesn't. They haven't really said anything, but I mean, who knows? Tomorrow is going to be a big day for that. But in terms of that, outside of Tre'Davious White, what are you looking at? Because I know this is a big group.
Yeah, so I right now have Trey on the pup. And that they'll just keep him there in his 4 weeks and we'll get him back after that. There's no benefit to put him on the 53 and then the IR because they're both 4 weeks. So if you're going to have a
1 day window too.
Yeah. If you're going to do that, you might as well just put him on the pup and not have to take a 53-man roster spot. So I have obviously Dane Jackson, Kair Elam, Taron Johnson, Saran Neal, absolute locks. Christian Benford's worked himself into a lock. He's obviously played fantastic. I don't know quite what we have there, but it seems like at minimum we hit another Dane Jackson, Levi Wallace-esque hit with a UDFA or 7th round pick, and he seems like he's a legit talent. I've flip-flopped on this one multiple times. I had Cam Lewis in this spot, then I had Nick McLeod, then I went back to Cam Lewis. I have Cam Lewis as a 6th guy. Either one of them, I don't want to be dismissive of their NFL careers because they deserve the attention they're getting. I have both of them as the placeholder until Tre'Davious White is ready. If somehow Trey White is ready week 1, I would have them not making the roster. I don't think they would go to a 7th cornerback, but I think they have 6 no matter what. So I have Trey White on the pup, and I have Cam Lewis as my 6th corner. And I did flip-flop. I had Nick McLeod, but I changed back to Cam Lewis.
Yeah, it's tough because Nick McLeod had absolute flashes in training camp. It seemed like that fire kind of smoldered a little bit in terms of preseason. But even Cam Lewis, there were stretches that he was hit or miss in preseason. He had some questionable plays, but nonetheless, he's still, both of them definitely flashed. And obviously as a UB product, everybody's pulling for him to actually get through and actually make the roster. I had the same thing. I have Tre'Davious White making the 50 or starting on the 53. And the only reason I'm a question about him going on the pup is after that 4 weeks, and there's, generally speaking, about a ramp up period of about 3 weeks. Because under pup, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're not able to practice with the team.
Correct.
So after that, then they have about a 3-week window. So you probably wouldn't see Trey until after the bye week.
They would have a choice. You can be immediately activated. They have up to 21 days. My guess is that if they did that, it would be the Chiefs game in week 6 that would be the target, that they would let him practice the week for week 5. And that they could play him that Steelers game, but that they would likely let him practice that week and then come back the next week against the Chiefs. So he'd have 2 weeks of practice to be able to play. Then you would get the immediate break with the bye and then back for week 8 for the Packers on for the rest of the season. So then you'd be talking about he would end up having 12 of the 17 games, which is pretty good. So that's my projection right now, is that we see him week 6 against the Chiefs. But we'll see where that goes. And like you said, we'll know much more about that tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. Everything else is pretty much the same. The only thing is obviously I don't have Cam Lewis or Nick McLeod, and that was a tough one, man.
When you go 10th, whether you do 10 offensive linemen, whether you do a 4th tight end, whether you do a 7th wide receiver, you got to take it off somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. And that was the big thing. I mean, I had Tommy Sweeney on and off, Cam Lewis on and then off. And I think the tough part is in terms of that many defensive backs, I just don't know how many you're going to carry, knowing that, I mean, Cam Lewis is never going to see the field, quite frankly, because I think Christian Benford basically made him expendable, unfortunately. Moving on, linebacker, I think should be an interesting one, and I think it lends itself to what could potentially happen in next year's free agency.
Yeah.
So, what are you thinking about linebacker? Do you think they go 5 or 6?
So that's been the toughest one for me.
Mm.
And that's where my 53rd spot is between Isaiah Hodgins, and then I'll get to it in a moment. So obviously Matt Milano, Tremaine Edmonds. I think Terrell Dodson's still pretty firmly linebacker 3. I think they drafted Terrell Bernard to be able to take that spot, but I think it's still Dodson. They did run some defense in the Broncos game that had Milano, Edmonds, and Bernard all on the field during some heavy sets when Taron Johnson came off the field. So that's interesting. They did that with the first team defense. So regardless of which guy it is, I think there's a firm top 4 where it's Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, Terrell Dodson, Terrell Bernard, and a line. Technically, we'll count Tyler Medikevich as a linebacker, but he's a linebacker like Taiwan Jones is a running back.
Right.
But I will say, I hope people noticed that in the game where Taiwan Jones, Tyler Medikevich, and Saran Neal sat, our coverage units gave up a whole bunch of returns in both punt and kick return in both games. So those guys are really good at their jobs. I'm glad we have them. Yes, we pay Medikevich more than I would like, but I don't care. I want the 53 best football players. He's one of our 53 best football players.
You want to win a Super Bowl. That's how you win a Super Bowl.
That's how those things work. Special teams matter. And I have it at 5. And I can be convinced that Balin Spector should get that spot over Isaiah Hodgins,
Spector,
or Nick McLeod, or whatever, or a 10th lineman. Like I'm open to that he's. So I'm going to explain this the same way I did Raheem Blackshear. Every single team has Markel Lee's and Joe Giles Harris's and Balin Spectors. They all do. And that we see it every year on Hard Knocks. It's just, that's the position that everybody has a bunch of guys. Linebackers are never claimed in cut down day.
Right.
He's probably not a linebacker in any traditional sense. He's probably a special teams guy, but there's enough potential that I'm open to that. And if someone wants to say that we've already snuck Cam Lewis through waivers 2 other years, what's the shame? What's the harm in doing it a 3rd year? Or that, hey, it doesn't really matter whether you have Tommy Sweeney or Quentin Morris, or that, hey, yeah, Isaiah Hodgins might get claimed, but so what? He's our 7th best wide receiver.
Right.
I could listen to that. So right now I have Balin Spector as like my 54th guy, just barely on the outside looking in, but you got to draw a line somewhere. So I have him just on the outside looking in, but he's also one of those guys where I could see him making it if they have some shenanigans somewhere else with an IR spot where all of a sudden Shaq Lawson gets cut and re-signed, or Bobby Hart gets cut and re-signed, or someone else along those lines it does, and they keep Spector because he would have to pass through waivers. So I do think that there's a chance we see some of that if there's some injuries here that we're not planning on with Quentin Morris. I don't think with Isaiah McKenzie, but could be, he had to leave practice too. With Trey White, with Marquez Stevenson, with Tommy Doyle. There's 4 or 5 guys that could make the 53 and then immediately get put on IR, and you bring those other guys back. And that could be why a Spector or a Tommy Sweeney or an Isaiah Hodgins make the roster, because they're going to have the spots to move around. And we didn't get to the specialists yet, but not signing a punter until Wednesday greatly benefits the team, because it's a bonus 53rd
you
spot.
Stole my entire thing. I was gonna say that's okay. We'll still cover it anyway. I agree. I think Balin Spector. I have him making the roster, but the only reason I do is because of Tremaine Edmonds. But let me pause this. I do not believe Balin Spector is Tremaine Edmonds' replacement next year.
Good.
I wanna kibosh that. I do believe Terrell Bernard absolutely could be Tremaine Edmonds' replacement, and then you could see a Balin Spector being his backup, or a mix of Terrell Dodson and Balin Spector. I think Balin Spector has flashed nicely for being a 6th round pick. 7th, what was he? 6, 7, somewhere in there, whatever.
6.
I think he's flashed nicely.
No, he was the 7th. Or did we not have a 7th?
I don't know.
I gotta look now. Tenuta was a 6th. Benford was a 6th. Areza was a 6th.
Are we the
Spectre had to be
Ravens?
You should seriously. Yeah, he had to be seventh. There we go. In the chat. They 3-5 Fox guys got us.
There we go. Yeah. So he's flashed. He's looked nice, and I think I know Brandon Bean and Sean McDermott love trying to keep their guys. So it wouldn't be surprising if they try to keep him on the 53. But like you said, it's entirely possible they just let him go through waivers and, hope and pray and wish on a star and see what happens. And, maybe just bring back Joe Giles Harris and kind of go that route. But the last thing, which you stole from me, was the fact that
I'm a thief of joy.
Yeah, I know what happens. They don't have a punter, which works kind of in their benefit because you don't have to have that handshake guy because you can just pass guys through because you keep Quentin Morris, put him on the 53, then put him on IR and you're good to go. But speaking on special teams, obviously you got Tyler Bass. He's not going anywhere. Reed Ferguson is one of the best long snappers in the NFL. Do you have a favorite thus far? Obviously, we saw Sam Martin is going to be hitting the road. Brent Kearns is going to be hitting the road. And then you got Marquette King, who apparently wants to punt. Jake Shum, who apparently Bills fans for some reason, who thinks he hasn't punted since 2016, can be a good punter. Is there somebody you're looking at that potentially could fill that slot?
So don't get me wrong. I understand fans wanting to bring back Brian Moorman. I saw that one. Jake Shum,
Yeah.
local boy, Marquette King. All of them have been out of the league 3, 6, and 9 years. So I'm pretty sure. Now, don't get me wrong. In a weird scenario where we didn't have any options, we probably have to be creative. Right now, we actually have a shot at like 2 different all-pro punters and another really good one because Kevin Huber, I think, is going to lose in Cincinnati. Or if not, if they change their mind, it could be Drew Chrisman that gets released, who's excellent. Jordan Berry was also released. And you talked about Sam Martin. So I think Brett Kern is the best punter in the NFL and that he is 36 and that maybe now he's one of the best punters instead of the best punter. But he's automatic. Like he is a pinpoint accurate punter that can place the ball exactly where he wants. The kind of guy that I think last year he had 21 punts inside the 20 with 1 touchback.
Wow.
He placed 21 inside the 20 with 1 touchback. He can just kick it out of bounds at the 5-yard line whenever he wants. And that's fun. And I would like to have that. And he's from Grand Island and his family are fanatic Bills fans. And like his brothers are famously crazy Bills fans. And it would just be cool. Now, if somebody wants to tell me that at this point in their careers, Sam Martin's a tiny bit better than Brett Kern, I'd probably listen. They're probably not even wrong, but I don't care.
Take the feel good story.
I don't care. Like they're both excellent. And if anybody thinks that he lost it, Brett Kern crushed it in the playoffs 8 months ago and in the preseason the last couple weeks.
Right.
So he still got it. He still got a season left in him at least. So I hope it's Kern, but I'll be perfectly happy if it's Mike Pilardi or if it's Jordan Berry or if it's Sam Martin or if it's Kevin Huber, because, the Bills are going to fall ass backwards into a punter upgrade they didn't deserve.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, this is just ironically, undeservedly fortunate timing that I think they're going to get Brett Kern, who's better than anybody we've had, including the draft pick we just released.
I was going to say, he better be better than Ariza. Yeah.
He's better than any, maybe, in 2022, he's better. Like maybe eventually he would have become whatever. But in 2022, Brett Kern's better than anybody we've had here for the past, since Brian Moorman. So if we end up somehow stumbling into a free Brett Kern before this season, we should thank our lucky stars.
I have a weird feeling that it's going to be Brett Kern. The Bills they're playing Russian roulette right now, making bad decisions. And the best thing they can do is get some nice little PR dust and sprinkle it all over some stuff. And that's the perfect way to do it. You got a Buffalo guy coming back and finishing his career, where he started. I think it'd be perfect. It'd be quite apropos. My wife says I've been saying that word too much, so I'm going to throw it in there.
I like it. Sprinkle. You guys sprinkle it in there once in a while.
Yeah. I think we are at the end of the 53, which is nice. Thank God, because I'm really quite sick of doing 53-man roster projections.
Don't worry, tomorrow they'll all be out the window. And unless somebody goes 53 for 53, nobody cares.
Oh, God. That'd be a good one. There should be a website that you should be able to do 53-man projections for teams. That being said, what I want to touch on real quick right before we get going is give me your prediction week 1 against the Rams.
So obviously 2 fantastic teams. The Rams are awesome. It's on the road. It's in LA. I think this Bills team is special. I really do. I think it's special. I think it's exceptionally talented. I think they're going to have a special season. I don't know if I'm going to predict it. I don't think 15-2 is crazy. I don't. I don't think that it's out of the question that they could have a historically good season. That's going to be put to the test immediately in these first 7 games. We're going to know because, probably 4 of their 5 or 6 hardest games are in the first 7. So we're going to know pretty quickly. But I think it starts with showing the nation, with every single team watching. I think we're not going to destroy them. We're not going to blow them out. They're a very, very good team. They're very talented. I think they're still figuring out their offensive line, losing Andrew Whitworth and getting things back together. I still think they're figuring some of that out. It sounds like Cam Akers is kind of back, but they're not 100% sure. They don't have OBJ back. So, there's still Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. They're excellent. I think that it's going to be, like Bills 31-27, something like that. I think it's a high scoring game. I think it's going to be good and entertaining, but I think the Bills can win this. And I think that it starts off a special season.
Yeah, I agree. I think, even though I'm going to be nervous and feeling like my stomach is in knots all day long waiting for, I hate 8:00 games. It's going to be brutal to have to sit there. That being said, I got to do one read because literally forgot. Travis Matthews, Innovative Fabrics, keep you looking and feeling your best, whether you are on the golf course or strolling through town, offering supreme comfort for every aspect of your life with clothing that's quick drying, wrinkle resistant, super soft. You can move seamlessly from work to play. Get 20% off your first order at travismatthew.com. You'll find the link right on Buffalo Late Night social media pages. Wow. That being said, Greg, I appreciate you coming on tonight and doing this 53. Joe Miller and Kevin Massare, unfortunately, were not able to join us. Joe is living the life on vacation, and Kevin is a man of mystery.
Maybe a father.
Maybe a father. God willing. That'd be amazing. Greg, tell people where they can find you.
Appreciate you very, very much. You can find me over having fun at Cover One. Go to our Cover One YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitter at Greg Tompsett, hanging out on our site at cover1.net, trying to do anything that we can to be able to bring you guys more and trying to just enjoy spending time with Bills fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Check out Cover One. They have fantastic stuff. Really, really, really high quality content. Multiple good shows, whether it's the Film Room or Going Deep Pod or the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Really, really good stuff there. That being said, I appreciate everybody who has tuned in tonight and checked out Buffalo Late Night. I truly appreciate every week you guys coming here and giving us a chance, giving me a chance, and tapping in. We will, I don't know if it's next week. It's all contingent on whether or not the renderings for the stadium come out. I've heard they could be coming soon, but if they do in fact happen within the next week, we'll have Tim Graham and Sale Capaccio on next week. I don't know if it's just all dependent. It really, whenever that stuff happens, but they are slated to come on when that happens. That being said, I appreciate everybody. This has again been Buffalo Late Night. I am Thomas DeLoss. You can find me at the Thomas DeLoss, and go Bills.
The Bills make me wanna shout. Kick your heels up and shout. Throw your hands up and shout. Throw your head back and shout. Come on now, the Bills are making it happen now. Stand up now, come on and shout. Yeah, yeah, yeah.